I've just completed a Jess Chung tutorial video where she presented a nice mountain road exercise where she painted that small painting with acrylic gouache. Here in my exercise I just actually followed more or less her instructions. My colors are not everywhere exactly the same, especially my road more like a traditional asphalt color, and Jess Chung's road was more bluish, and here in my road I try to mimic more humps than in her exercise. Otherwise, definitely I made a number of errors. I simply wasn't able to create this skyline here. This was a mountain line. Definitely I'm a complete beginner, so therefore I have to practice this kind of blending. With oil pastel it is dead easy, but with gouache, actually this is not gouache. Okay, of course it is exactly the same thing as acrylic gouache. This is called PVA Tempera. This is Nevskaya Palitra, Russian company's product, St. Petersburg masterclass. PVA polyvinyl acetate is the binder, which is kind of glue, and the paint behaves exactly the same as acrylic gouache. Jess Chung used, I think, Holbein acrylic gouache. Here, my exercise, I used. I have a very nice collection of this PVA Tempera. It is called Tempera, that's the name. However, because it is very similar in concept to acrylic gouache, when I say PVA gouache, that could be completely parallel in the concept of acrylic gouache. So what is special with PVA Tempera, that is PVA gouache, is that when it is dry, then you cannot resolve it back with water, so it won't blend back. And because this is very similar to acrylic gouache, it dries very fast. And here, that's why, in my opinion, a wet palette is very important. Jess Chung, she didn't use wet palette, and she was complaining that she has to hurry a lot. In my exercise, I didn't have to hurry because this is just a simple homemade wet palette where I use the regular materials, kitchen materials, but it works excellently, so brutally awesome. And as you can see, I try to use as small amount of tempera, paint, as possible. Still, I had but some amount of tempera. For example, burnt umber. This is ultramarine blue, and then this is orange. I think this is cadmium orange. Of course, the rest are just consumed more or less. This is black. I have here in my case this is what kind? Lamp black, and this lamp black mixed with cadmium lemon produces this dark olive green. I actually just learned this from Jess Chung. She is amazing in colors, and that's gives a fantastic warm, let's call it warm oil green. So in my palette, in my kit, I don't have practically only two greens. One is emerald green, and the other green is, I think, chromium. Yes, chromium oxide. These are the two greens. I also wanted to place an order for sap green, but that store where I bought, this is a local store here in my country, they didn't have the sap green. So, but they didn't have, I mean, this whole set doesn't have at all olive green. So, but fortunately it is so that easy to mix. Just use. So this is what I learned from Jess Chung. I think I'm going to subscribe to her Patreon channel, because she has a number of wonderful exercises. So she is also paints not only traditional gouache, but some of the exercises she makes with acrylic gouache, and that's why I picked this specific exercise. I called it Mountain Road, Jess Chung's Mountain Road exercise, because I just wanted to remake her acrylic gouache exercise with PVA Tempera, and it worked excellently. As seen here, she started, it's freely available on YouTube, just follow that. I just gave a summary what she is doing. She used cerulean blue for the sky, and of course white, titanium white, and some small amount of burnt umber, just to mute the reduce the saturation of these colors. So this was the mostly the combination of these three colors for the skies, and ultramarine blue was only used at least in my for the road, combined with burnt umber. So that was the combination which produced this color. Otherwise, just this was all the green. Of course, the greens were made with as mentioned, lemon, cadmium lemon, and lamp black. So that was very important, and of course white, just various whiteness. And of course I tried to make some clouds here with white, which is a bit different on her exercise. And also I tried to add some more saturated yellow in the foreground, and some grass-like vegetation nearby. So I am pretty happy with this exercise. Definitely I have to practice a lot, and it was really fun. When I was experimenting and experimenting, learning watercolor and watercolor pencils, somehow I didn't feel it close to the way I think about building a painting, building a picture. And then I went over to dry pastel first, but it wasn't a medium for me because if this anyway. And then oil pastel is brutally excellent. However, I think this gouache is even more versatile than oil pastel. So I think this could be, and especially this PVA Tempera, which makes possible practically unlimited amount of layering. And then it dries to, it doesn't dry, maybe you cannot see, but what is interesting, when this paint dries, it doesn't have this typical gouache chalky feel. It's more neutral, and also it doesn't have the acrylic shiny plasticky feel. So I think that's an excellent alternative to acrylic gouache. I don't have acrylic gouache. In my city it is available, but it is about twice as more expensive than this paint. A Turner acrylic gouache is available. Maybe once I'm going to buy in the future, but definitely until I'm very happy with this masterclass PVA Tempera, why just spend another lot of money, because it's not inexpensive at all. And what else was interesting, that again this homemade wet palette was fantastic, and I learned a hell lot the way Jess Chung was building her painting. I think if I were doing it on my own, I would do a number of things a bit differently. So I think she often just changed the colors and jumped here and there. So she's really an excellent artist. Maybe I would do a bit differently some of the painting orders. And why is it possible? Because it is absolute, because of these unlimited possibilities with layering. Practically you can follow the typical acrylic painting style. Therefore there is no limitation. If you just paint the background layer, and then you can paint especially the darker shades or shapes over to the lighter one, and of course also the white ones. For example, these clouds I painted as the last step over to the clouds. But anyway, what is important, that you can follow this typical traditional background, upwards background first, middle ground second, and third foreground. So that's that kind of building the scene is completely possible. So you don't have to think, how to say, specific strategies of darks and light colors, because you can more or less build your painting in whatever order. However, this is not completely true. So to be completely honest, because these paints, gouache as well as PVA Tempera, they are just like any paint, are not 100% opaque. That is, they are around 51 to 100% percentage opaque. But I think none of them, maybe the black, maybe even not the black. So therefore there is always the background. So if you want a complete opaque layer, definitely you have to apply 2 but 3 layers, and then of course after 3 layers the background, the underground layer is completely hidden. But otherwise it is also possible, especially when you use a lot of water, then you can glaze very nicely. So at the very end I try to mimic some some sunshine, and I use this wonderful cadmium yellow medium paint with a lot of water, and just somehow try to glaze over to some parts of this painting, just to give the feel of some sun hitting some of the areas. So guys, so this was my short summary of Jess Chung's mountain road exercise. Again, she used acrylic gouache. Here I used PVA Tempera from St. Petersburg, Nevskaya Palitra product, excellent, top-notch quality, light, fast, opaque, and dries to water resistant. So if you have a chance to grab, place order and buy these colors, don't hesitate, highly recommend them. Another important thing with PVA gouache or PVA Tempera or any kind of gouache is that a gouache or PVA Tempera or acrylic tempera or acrylic gouache painting can be varnished, and the simplest varnish and which produces fantastic scent, and this is just a simple hairspray. And this hairspray is widely used in my area by soft pastel artists, even professional artists who are selling their product. They use hairspray for 2 decades or so, and then I learned this trick from them. And when I started working with oil pastel, I also gave a try to hairspray, and it worked brilliantly with oil pastels too. So the stickiness of oil pastel is completely gone. And here with gouache, of course, you are not forced, because it's not sticky. However, because especially traditional gouache is not water resistant, so if you want somehow to protect your painting against some water just dropping on it, and therefore it's highly recommended to spray or use. Of course, this is not the only varnish, this is the simplest one, and especially when, of course, this is not an artist tested spray varnish method, therefore definitely I wouldn't recommend. I'm completely neutral, so it's really up to you to decide. If you are selling artists, if you want to sell maybe you would better to use more expensive. However, this is not cheap. Specifically designed varnish for your painting. I also have some bottles of this high quality, but honestly, when exercising and for my sketchbooking, I love this. Is so convenient, and honestly the painting smells Oh, gorgeous, just hairspray. And what you can see, and it also produces a gentle shine to the painting, and which is also gives the illusion that it is a more, how to say, protected, it is a finalized piece of art product. So that's why I just sprayed it gently. And another interesting thing which I recognize, that when you spray it, somehow a tiny bit the colors become more lush, I mean more vibrant, or a tiny bit deeper. It doesn't mean that they really deepen, but somehow, yes, more saturated or something like that. Therefore, it's that spraying has more advantage. Another interesting thing that Jess Chung uses 100% cotton paper, and I don't remember if she's using exactly the same paper as I have it here. This is Art Philosophy watercolor paper, 100% cotton, and it is made in Malaysia. Yes. I don't know, paper from Netherlands. I don't know what does it mean. The paper from Netherlands and made in Malaysia. Anyhow, so this was the paper I used. And what is interesting, that some of the gouache artists say that 100% cotton is not required at all. Even some say that 100% cotton paper is not perfect, not ideal for gouache painting. And honestly, my first experience, I'm completely with Jess Chung. I mean, honestly, to me, it really didn't matter. I didn't notice any difference between 100% cotton painting, because this painting was painted with very thick layers. So of course, some of the areas I used here a heavy water washes, some parts, but I also had a quite inexpensive aquarelle watercolor. This is zero cotton, again 300 gram per square meter paper. This is really inexpensive and affordable, and I honestly didn't see any major difference between painting at least this PVA Tempera on this 100% cotton. However, I also have, and maybe also have, a big block of hot pressed 100% cotton Fabriano Acquarello, and maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, Sunday, next week, I'm going to give it a try, and I will see if this how to say, more expensive hot pressed 100% cotton paper gives any difference in the color mixing. So what is definitely a big lesson, that when you paint a traditional gouache, let me just show you, I think. Yes, this one I painted recently. This was a Mike Thomas Domestica course, a storefront. This I painted with traditional gouache, actually a Pannon color tempera gouache. This is where the binder is dextrin, and I also sprayed it, if you can recognize it, very gently. so it has also some gentle shine. And when I painted on this regular non 100% cotton paper, I didn't notice any difference between the experience I had with this painting process on 100% cotton. However, what was a big and major difference, but this is the difference between of the paints, not the paper. So when you paint with traditional gouache, then there you can absolutely blend your colors on the paper, and I love it. It's absolutely fantastic because the traditional gouache, the designer gouache, is water soluble, and it never dries out, and it blends fantastic. And all the time, even the smallest amount of paint you put on the other layer, you can start blending. There is some possibility of layering, but you have to be very cautious and very gentle when layering. However, then blending on the paper is absolutely possible with traditional gouache. It's almost impossible with PVA Tempera. And also Jess Chung, when she was painting, she also explained that it's a no. It's much better that just you mix your paint on the palette, especially on the wet palette, and then on the wet palette as here, and then you apply there. So definitely I made a number of mistakes here, and I tried to correct them with the traditional gouache techniques, and it didn't work. So the only thing to fix an error in your acrylic gouache or PVA Tempera painting is that mix your color and just paint it over. Of course, you don't have to wait a lot because the PVA Tempera dries very fast, a lot faster than the traditional gouache painting. So here you can do a complete painting. Of course, these are very small A5 size paintings. You can complete without wet palette. This one is very tricky to do without a wet palette. So that's why I highly recommend to use a wet palette, even a homemade one, when you start working with PVA Tempera or acrylic gouache. So my friends, that was the extensions, how I use hairspray to varnish, protect, give a temporary protection to my simple artwork, and then my experience with 100% cotton paper.